Perfect. Thank you, Eva. So, okay, so our first speaker is CEO of Limbus AI, a company that is specialized in machine learning-based software for radiation therapy. Throughout his career, he has dedicated himself to advancing radiation therapy technology that has a high clinical impact. Notably, he developed volumetric modulated arc therapy, or VMAT, which is now the most common form of radiation treatment globally. He has explored several pathways in his career as a medical physicist, including clinical practice, academic research, and industry. In his current role at Limbus AI, he leads the team in developing AI-based organ segmentation software that is used in over 350 clinics. So everyone, please join me in welcoming our first speaker, Dr. Karl Otto. Doctor, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Can you see the normal screen for presenting? Yep, great. Yeah, thanks for inviting me to speak today. It's a pleasure to come here and talk about my experiences in industry and entrepreneurship. There's probably a lot of different experiences in working in industry and entrepreneurship from medical physics. I can only really provide, I guess, my own experiences, and I try to provide insights on what I think is important for medical physicists to think about if they want to become an entrepreneur. And hopefully it'll be interesting for everybody. So why would a medical physicist necessarily want to be an entrepreneur? I think if you're the kind of person that has a vision of how things could be better, and you also want to go through the process of trying to realize that vision, like a lot of people may have ideas about how we can improve things, but it's a big step, an additional step to really try to make that a reality. If you're the kind of person that wants to go through that whole process, then I think being an entrepreneur is pretty ideal. If you like to be involved with dissemination of technology, so if you have something that you've worked on in your PhD that you think has value, you may want to try to get that so it's distributed globally, and that's pretty challenging, but can also be very rewarding. If you enjoy a competitive work environment, industry is generally quite competitive, and it's a healthy competition. I think that being forced to compete, being forced to improve whatever you're working on, your product, so that it's better than somebody else's, makes it so that patients, the people that we're treating, are going to get the best quality treatments possible. And my company, it does, I'll talk a bit more about later, but it does artificial intelligence segmentation for radiation therapy. And there's several companies doing the same thing right now. And if there weren't those other companies around, I'm pretty sure we'd get a little bit lazy, and the quality of our product would not be as good as it is today. If you like building a team, growing a team, I think having a startup can be really rewarding in that sense. Our company, Limbus AI, started off with only 4 founders, and now we're up to 30 people. And it's been really fun finding good people and building the teams, and then just seeing that grow over time. And there's also the potential for financial gain. So it's unlikely that you'll get rich in a salaried position, but as an entrepreneur, you have the chance of making a lot of money. However, I'm sure that on average, the average entrepreneur would make the same amount as somebody getting a salary, or maybe even less. So it's a high risk, high reward situation. If you're comfortable with that, then it may be a good path for you. So my path, I started off at McGill, did my undergrad and master's there. I then worked in a small clinic in Gatineau, Quebec for a couple of years. This was really good experience because there were only 2 of us at that clinic, 2 recent graduates, and we had to learn all of the basic clinical things that a medical physicist has to do in a short period of time. I got a little bit bored of that, so I moved to BC and did a PhD while working part-time in the clinic. Funnily enough, James Robar was there at the same time. In fact, James Robar kind of mirrored a lot of the stuff I've done in this list. I then became an academic medical physicist at UBC, and had some students. And I was still doing some part-time clinical work, but I was slowly, over the time from my PhD, then continued to work a bit in the clinic, and then academic, was slowly transferring into kind of industry or entrepreneurship. I had some strong influences when I was younger. My father had his own architectural firm, so he built a business, and I saw him, go through that process of building a business and the challenges and the rewards that he got from that. So it probably influenced me kind of indirectly. I had a small construction business as a summer job. So instead of working in a lab as a student, a co-op student or something like that, I was trying to get contracts to do simple construction jobs with a couple of my friends that I hired as employees over the summer. And that actually was useful, I think, because it gave me gave me the confidence that I could do stuff on my own. I didn't need to be an employee of an organization to feel like comfortable. And that made it easier later on to kind of give up my day job and pursue entrepreneurship and working in industry. So I took a course called Technology Entrepreneurship at UBC as well. This was a really inspiring course, but I have to say it was right before the tech bubble in 2000. So we had all these kind of speakers come in from different companies, CEOs of companies that were hugely successful. So it was really inspiring. If you'd had that course the next year, in fact, I think they canceled the course the next year because most of those companies had gone bankrupt. It was kind of a crazy time. The main thing I got out of that course, though, is that these speakers that would come in, they seemed just like average people to me. I mean, they worked hard. They were maybe a little bit smarter, kind of passionate about what they were doing, but they didn't actually have some kind of magic secret ingredient that I could see. So it kind of made me feel like, maybe I could do this too if I wanted to. So my first big experience in industry was with VMAT. In 2003, people had shifted focus from developing IMRT to online imaging like cone beam CT. Treatment times were getting a lot longer because IMRT was slower. And then with the addition of online imaging, it was even slower. So only a small fraction of patients could benefit from a technology like IMRT. So there was a feeling, I think there was a feeling in the community at the time that this was a natural trade-off you had to make, that in order to get higher quality treatments, it's going to take longer. I wasn't convinced that was necessarily the case. So I took a look at, maybe we could make things faster. So I did I thought that this might be an opportunity. And often I think a quality of all entrepreneurs is they're a little bit opportunists. So could you treat patients very quickly? Like, is a fast arc IMRT even theoretically possible? And back of the envelope calculation that you can do shows that, yeah, it should be possible to treat patients quickly. There's no fundamental reason why not. But the question still is, can you derive a good treatment plan for any patient in a reasonable amount of time that still is able to be treated on a conventional LINAC? And this would take a couple of years to figure out. And this is where there's a lot of risk, right? Because even though I didn't know if this was possible, I thought, it might be possible, but I did know it was going to take years to figure out whether it is actually possible. So I'm going to spend years of my time, my professional time, to work on something that may be a complete failure. Fortunately, it was not a failure. And I worked on other stuff that's been a failure, but you don't usually talk about that stuff. I spent several weeks developing this kind of very elaborate presentation to try to it's like a sales pitch to bring it to companies like Varian or Elekta, the larger radiation therapy companies, to convince them to try to sell this. And I learned some professional animation software, created software to simulate the actual delivery. Like, none of this stuff was actually going to help the fundamental technology, but it would help me with my sales pitch. So I spent a lot of time on this, and I actually was lucky enough to get a meeting in Palo Alto with several Varian executives, the CEO, president, et cetera. And at that meeting, part of my presentation was this, this stuff that I'd learned. So you have to be a bit of a salesperson, if you want to be an entrepreneur. I mean, you don't have to do that all the time, but if you want people to believe in your ideas, you really have to have a little bit of skill in that area. So anyways, this is the video I showed them, and you may have even seen this before. I've shown this like 1,000 times now. And this is the dose delivery, showing the real-time dose as a function of beam angle, the MLC shaping, and the dose building up over time. for a treatment. So this was I actually gave a presentation previous to this to a smaller group of Varian people, and I basically just showed them a bunch of graphs of dose volume histograms and dose distributions and whatnot, and they weren't super excited by it, it kind of prompted me to make this much more fancier presentation. And this kind of hit home for them, also because tomotherapy was becoming a concern for them. Tomotherapy was a new company that was very exciting, able to deliver very complex dose distributions. They were worried about tomotherapy starting to take their market share. So this would be a potential way of them of stopping tomotherapy from taking so much market share and competing directly with them. Again, you know, the healthy competition in the field forces innovation. So I did license it to them eventually. It became the #1 priority at Varian, and they worked. I worked with their radiation therapy planning team in Finland. Really smart people. They weren't super happy to see me. They didn't. I don't think they believed me that it was going to work. And I totally respect that. I wouldn't have believed it either until they could prove it. But after a week or so, I was able to prove that it did work. And then they worked on it. You know, I worked very closely on it with them, and it became what was called the product Rapid Arc. This is a picture of me. I'm in my early 30s here, and you know, I may look a little smug in this picture, but honestly, I was more like a deer in the headlights. This was very new to me, very exciting, and I was quite nervous giving talks at all sorts of different conferences. This is me actually in Barcelona. I gave a presentation to a few hundred people there in this beautiful like marble mausoleum, and you know, before this, I had not done anything of note. Yeah, I had to learn a lot of new skills quickly to really kind of exploit this opportunity. So I was involved in some other things after that. In 2015, I sold another company to Varian, and I focused my time on artificial intelligence. So I kind of took some time off of radiation therapy to learn more about artificial intelligence and deep learning. I then met with 3 people that had been doing some work with artificial intelligence on automatically segmenting images, so automatic contouring of medical images for radiation therapy. We decided to found a company called Limbus AI. So the other founders are Dr. Joshua Gianbattista. He's a radiation oncologist, Carter Colbeck, who's our expert in AI, and then Joshua's brother, John Gianbattista, who's our director of software. And these 3 guys had actually known each other since they were very young. Obviously, the 2 that are brothers, but also Carter. So they had a really good relationship already of working together. They didn't have a lot of experience in radiation therapy, though. So that's kind of what I was bringing to the table, along with my knowledge of radiation therapy technology and also artificial intelligence. So the company, I put in some money. We were very frugal building the company for the first couple of years. We didn't need any other outside investment. So the company is fully like founder, employee owned and operated. We grew the company. So after around 2 years, we released our product and started to really have to grow the company in terms of staff. We had to have salespeople, more regulatory people. We had to have support personnel. We also hired more engineers to improve our product more rapidly. So we have 9 software and machine learning engineers, 1 radiation oncologist, 2 medical physicists, a physics assistant, and about 6 radiation therapy therapists / dosimetrists. We are an AI company, so the data is critical to the quality of our product. So having clinical experts is really important for us. So we do have, you know, a lot of people focused on, you know, general development of the product. So 9 engineers, as well as all of these clinical people. So most of our staff is about product development. We're a virtual company. So we actually started the company before COVID, about 2 years before COVID hit. And it was remote at the time, but there were really only 4 of us. During COVID, we built the company and we were already remote, so we didn't really have to deal with a lot of the issues around COVID, which was, you know, fortunate for us. Our official home is actually in Regina, Saskatchewan, where John and Joshua are from. So yeah, so it's been really challenging, but really exciting building the company from scratch. We had many different potential pitfalls along the way, which we've managed to avoid. One of the best decisions we made was to go global early on. So to try to distribute our product all over the world instead of just confining it to like North America. So we're now in over 350 centers globally. There's about 100 centers trialing the product. We process, so we process a scan, so we generate the contours on a scan for about 400,000 patients per year right now, which is a lot, right? It's pretty exciting to think that there's that many patients in the world that are benefiting from the work that you've done. We sell directly in North America, but we have distribution network for Europe and the rest of the world, which is just a more efficient way for a small company to sell their products. We don't have to pay salespeople, but then they get a big chunk of a percentage of the sale. So those were my experiences, and I'm just going to finish off here. Like, I was trying to think before this talk, what are some of my traits that probably helped me as an entrepreneur? I get bored pretty easily. So if you get bored easily, I can pretty much guarantee as an entrepreneur, you're not going to get bored. So that's avoiding getting, if you want to avoid getting bored, become an entrepreneur. If you're an opportunist, so if you like to, find opportunities and also act on them, then it's probably a good thing for you. If you're able to handle risk, so if you're willing to like quit your job for a couple of years and get paid almost nothing, then maybe this is okay for you as well. This other one, passionate about your work, obviously that applies to any job that you would take in the world, right? Doesn't matter if you're a clinical physicist, academic physicist, or in industry, you want to be passionate about your work. However, in industry, especially if you're doing a startup, there's a lot of ups and downs. And to get you through those down parts, I think it helps to be pretty passionate. And if you want to be successful, you pretty much have to be lucky as well. Luck is definitely part of the equation here. Fortunately, I had a lot of this last one. All right, thanks very much. That's all I have for today.
Thank you so much. That was really interesting. So we'll go already to the second speaker, and if people have questions, we'll just wait for the Q&A at the end of the two presentations. So our second speaker is the Chief of Medical Physics at Nova Scotia Health. He's the Professor of Radiation Oncology and the Founding Director of Graduate Medical Physics programs at Dalhousie University. He balances his time between a leadership role at Nova Scotia Health, direct patient support, and cutting-edge research and development. He's committed to improving the treatment of cancer patients. He's also the co-founder of Halifax-based Adaptiiv Medical Technologies, a company for which he was honored with the Governor-General of Canada Innovation Award in 2021. So it is my pleasure to introduce our second speaker, Dr. James Robar. Doctor, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Can you see my slide?
Yes.
Okay, that's great. Karl, I really enjoyed that talk. I think it's good that you're here and that I'm here because in a way we took very different approaches. Karl talked about being able to take risk and dive into it and maybe quitting your job for a couple of years. And I, to put it very plainly, I didn't have those kind of guts and that risk tolerance. So as you can see, I still have a day job. I'm the Chief of Medical Physics in Halifax. So it's a different perspective, I think, with some pros and cons for sure. I was thinking about all of you, that is students and residents, and trying to come up with some lessons that I learned the hard way in a kind of unexpected journey through entrepreneurship. So I'm going to just spend a few slides talking about how Adaptiiv, the company, started. We're a company in Halifax with I think 25 employees right now. 6 lessons in spinning out a company that I think I learned the hard way. Some lessons were harder than others. And along the way, maybe a few cool things about our technology. I'm going to show you some stuff that is Health Canada and FDA cleared, but also some other stuff which isn't cleared yet and maybe will never be cleared, some ideas. So we're going to start off with a guy called Bruce. I'm going to tell you a story, okay? Stay with me. And why is he important? And I wanted to tell you this story because the origin of Adaptiiv, the company, was really really begins with a patient. So here's Bruce. His name's Bruce Ross, actually. And we treated Bruce in 2005 for base of tongue cancer. And I happened to do his IMRT treatment plan. But, you know, I was a clinical physicist behind the scenes. I never actually met him at the time. And he was cured. And even though he was cured, talking to him years later, there were aspects of his treatment with which he was highly dissatisfied. So head and neck patient, he had to wear a mask. He had to have that made for him, a hot water bath. He had a bolus, which kept falling off his neck. Another thing about Bruce, though, is he's a really good road cyclist. And he said, okay, I'm cured of cancer. I'm moving to Mexico, and I'm going to ride my bike year round. Now, Bruce had enjoyed a very fruitful life and career in the medtech sector, not our field, but a different area of medtech. So he couldn't help but keep his eye on the patents that were coming into our tech transfer office at Dalhousie University. So Bruce, being quite comfortable in Mexico riding his bike, contacted Peter Hickey and said, hey, you and I actually got our MBAs together. Bruce did his MBA later in life. And Alex Dunphy, these guys walked into my office one day without even making an appointment and said, James, we hear you have some patents. What's radiation oncology? And I was like, these guys build apps and software, and what do they really know about medical devices? But fast forward today, Alex Dunphy is actually now our CEO. Very smart guy, learned the basics of radiation therapy and radiation oncology very quickly. And so we decided to go for it in 2016, and we started up this company. We weren't self-funded. We had lots of support. And here's a lesson for you. There are agencies all around you, government agencies or government-related, that can help you get off the ground. Today, this might be a little bit outdated. I think we have our product in over 20 countries. All right, are you ready for 6 lessons? And these are in no particular order. These are lessons that I thought of. So if you're a grad student, let's say, or a resident, and you have an idea for some technology, it's not enough to publish that. And you know, your PhD supervisor will encourage you to publish, and that's academia for you. But you need to do more to make it reach commercialization and make it reach patients. Why? First reason is, sorry to give you some stats here, and maybe your PhD supervisor wouldn't give you these stats, but maybe not that many people are actually reading your paper. You know, it feels really good when you get that acceptance of a paper, but the stats say that, you know, there are 1.8 million articles published each year in 28,000 journals. These are just scientific articles. And this is a while ago, but, you know, half of academic papers may not be read or may be read only by their authors and journal editors in this study. So, and I think the average is like 0.6 times or something like that. I don't want to dissuade you from publishing because that's the scientific process, but you know, those are the stats. Second, your paper just may not be seen by the right commercial partner. Also, if you haven't already patented that, by publishing, it's already in the public domain, right? It's freely available. And then Karl alluded to this, but it's a big job, right? To go from a prototype or a scientific study and build a product out of it. Monumental task, given all of the regulatory requirements. Is a big difference between a prototype and a product. The other thing is, and I know this now from Adaptiiv, we have roadmaps. We've got plans within the company that stretch years into the future. And so if somebody comes in and parachutes an idea on us, it's quite hard to disrupt that path. So that's lesson 1. Lesson 2, if you have an idea and you think it's too simple or too obvious, don't assume that someone has already done it. Okay, and that's kind of how I felt about 3D printing in radiation oncology. And in 2013, this is when we all started to learn about 3D printing, not because it was new, but because the patents on it had expired. And so all these 3D printer companies started making it accessible. And in medical physics, we noticed that all these printable materials are actually very close to tissue equivalent, very similar to solid water or superflab or stuff we were already using in the clinic, which was fortuitous. So why couldn't we print patient devices? And there was a lot of motivation to do that. You know, I lived through 10 years in the clinic. Here's somebody's grandmother's crock pot and a bunch of wax, and we were making boluses like this for patients. A terrible process, right? You think you've made something nice for a process for a patient, and then you CT scan the patient and you actually notice that it's full of air bubbles and doesn't actually fit your patient. And then it breaks like halfway through the treatment course. So realizing and looking around and kind of fighting this initial idea that someone's already used 3D printing in our field, we decided to file some patents, and we ended up getting kind of the foundational IP in this area. So that's lesson 2. Lesson 3, your first idea may not be the big idea, or may not be what's actually needed by customers or the market. And I could alternately title this lesson, Complex is Not Better, always. So, you know, when you're in grad school, complexity is kind of rewarded, right? You're in physics, maybe the Department of Physics or something. You have to publish a thesis, you have to write papers that are novel, and complexity is kind of rewarded. This was our first idea in 3D printing. On the left, you see a patient treatment plan with 12 MeV electrons. I've thresholded this at the 90% isodose surface, and if you look carefully, the PTV is right at the surface. So we're giving all this unnecessary, unwanted dose to the normal brain, even some hotspots to the normal brain. And in addition to 3D printing bolus, or if you're going to 3D print a bolus for the patient, you might as well give it an intelligent topology that can spare all of the distal organs at risk. And so this is the first problem we tackled. This guy is now Dr. Shichin Su. He was my master's student at the time. He came up with some really nice but complicated algorithms to create the topology of that bolus. And today, if you order one of these, and these are printed with HP technology, it looks like this. We even roughen the surface when we 3D print it, so it will grab onto the patient's skin and so on. But guess what? What customers really wanted was way simpler than that. It was just simple bolus, uniform bolus that just fits the patient well. And they wanted a nice streamlined process to order it and have it shipped to them. And why? Well, if you use superflab, and this is treating the chest wall, you see things like in the left column. And then if you 3D print something, you can eliminate all these air gaps. And if you think back to your radiological physics, about a 5 millimeter air gap at 6 MV can cause a 5% underdosing of the surface. So we studied this, and we found out that it was working, basically, that we could reduce these air gaps significantly. And this is what patients needed, and what most of the market was demanding, much simpler than our first idea. Then we discovered they wanted also very flexible bolus, and so it became not 3D printing the bolus itself, but molds into which we can pour some skin-safe silicone. Lesson 4, you may think that, you know, your customers might be clinical physicists like me, or radiation oncologists, or radiation therapists, dosimetrists, and that you might initially think that they value the same things that you do. That if you conceive of a product in a certain way, that they will also want that product. But guess what? I was actually wrong about this. I was obviously, you know, I was really interested in 3D printing. I imagined that everybody would want a 3D printer at the point of care, that they just needed some turnkey software which interface with their planning system to produce devices like that. Guess what? I was totally wrong. Most of our market is in the US. Most of those medical physicists want nothing to do with 3D printing. What they actually wanted was the end device. They wanted that bolus in their hand on time with their patients, for their patients with a suitable material. And so we had to completely pivot to develop a slick portal that allows you to order these kind of Uber Eats style. You can order it and you can see when it's being manufactured. And this is a super cool technology called multi-jet fusion printing, much better than you could ever do at the point of care in terms of important things like radiological uniformity and so on. The other thing physicists wanted was to not do any work after they received this thing. So they wanted the QA to already be done. So something that's done here is the printed device for the patient is actually optically scanned. And then we provide a difference map, a measure of spatial fidelity to the customer, as well as, predicted versus actual mass and density. Lesson 5. You can look out in our field and say, there's a technique that's been used for years and years, decades maybe. Who am I to try to disrupt that, right? People seem happy with it. But our field, even though we have a lot of cool tech in our field, it's really not that nimble. And you can look at areas of our field like brachytherapy. Yes, brachy has seen some progress in some corners of it, but I think it's been given a bit of a pass in terms of innovation over the years. And so don't be afraid to challenge these things, even though they've been around for a long time. And so one of the things that Adaptiiv has developed is especially for interstitial treatment, gynae, as well as skin treatment, completely patient personalized applicators, really with the hope to displace previous applicators. And the benefits of this is real. We're actually reaching disease, for example, at the top of the vaginal vault that we could never reach before. Because you're not using generic applicators anymore for a patient. You can place interstitial needles at any angle. You can even curve them with these 3D printed guides. And so things get better. Another thing is, of course, we make these masks, right? We make these immobilizers for patients. Even our patients will call this water torture. But the real problem, other than patient experience, is the quality is entirely dependent on who makes this mask. And I've seen really good ones. I've seen ones that allow the patient to move all around, causing intrafractional error. And so why can't we automate that and remove the human? So, and there are other reasons too. As soon as you digitize a process like that, you can leverage bespoke materials with good radiological properties. You can make it rigid where it has to be rigid, more forgiving to add patient comfort in other areas. And so we worked on this. And the idea here is you would take optical imaging of the patient in about 3 minutes using the same portal that the company developed for the bolus and other stuff. You would order this and it would actually be in your hand in the clinic in time for the CT sim, rather than starting to make it at the time of CT sim. So this has been a fun project to work on. A fun thing about this multi-jet fusion is you can actually print the top layer in color. So our future software will allow you to drop in an image, and then the patient, especially pediatric patients, could be, a superhero or a princess or a dinosaur or whatever. Final lesson, and I could have a lot more if I had more time, but I pared it down to 6. One thing that I've really enjoyed in having a startup company is the interaction between my graduate students and the company. First of all, the grad students get to go into the company and meet everyone, people who aren't physicists, right? Sales, marketing, regulatory people, customer success people, and they get to work on things that are pipeline ideas, aren't immediately acutely needed in terms of the commercial interests of the company. So here's one example. The star of this show is Nick Lynch, who's one of my PhD students. And he worked on camera-based radiotherapy dosimetry, 3D printing scintillators. So here's an example of what Nick has produced. A curved bolus type, this is 5 millimeters thick with 3 millimeter scintillating elements. So we can actually print scintillators in some regions and optically isolating materials in others. Here it is with the beam on the right. Obviously, we have to do some image processing to get rid of the noise here in real time. But then Nick, of course, went on and started studying this under VMAT and was able to calibrate these and do some examination of, in terms of quantitative measurement of dose, how does this compare to other algorithms, to either calculation or other measurements? And, he's getting within a bit over 5% or so. So he's starting to get into the territory that you might achieve with OSLDs or radiochromic film, something like that. Yet we can get spatial dosimetry information in close to real time on a patient. So I don't know if that will ever be a product. Who knows? It's been a great PhD for Nick. But my point here is that this was supported by the company. In working with the company, he was able to produce prototypes and have a lot of different experiences compared to if the company didn't exist. All right, this could be my last slide. These are some bonus ideas that I didn't have time to expound upon. You might have an idea, let's say as a grad student. You need to figure out, and there's a fork in the road, right? You could do what we did here with our 3D printing technologies and have a spin-out company, or you could just license that to a company and kind of say goodbye to your invention, hope for the best. If it's a one-off product, then it could be a licensing option if it's just a small product with a limited market. If there's a pipeline of products that are related, it could be a spin-out. Also, is there recurring revenue involved? Do you just sell this thing once, or are there consumables? You really need to think about the business model. If you launch a spin-out company, don't think you'll spend most of your time on the technology, especially in the beginning. Most spin-out companies are actually not self-funded. You have to hit the pavement and you need to raise a lot of money to do this. And that means that if you're a founder of the company, you're going to spend a lot of time on this, not the technology itself necessarily, at least in the beginning. This takes a lot of time and effort. This is highly editorial. Are you a medical physicist? If yes, then you're probably not the CEO unless you're Karl. You have to be a real unicorn to do what Karl did. And actually, when I look at the CEO, Alex, of our company, all the decisions he makes, his strategic moves, I very often say, that's why I'm not the CEO. But, there are unicorns. Finally, think big, not local. Canada is probably not your first market. Karl talked about the importance of going global. I think it's really true. And a particular one, and actually it's funny, I recently heard Rock Mackey say the same thing. Try to avoid bringing your tech into your own clinic if you are in the clinic. It's a conflict of interest. It's super awkward. I actually made this mistake, but I've had to step back of everything 3D printing related in my clinic. It would be easier if it wasn't in my clinic. And whether or not it is doesn't really make a difference to the company. So anyway, hindsight. All right. That's all I've got for you today. Thank you very much. It's fun to give this talk. I don't normally talk about entrepreneurship, so it's a different experience.
Thank you so much, Dr. Robar. That was great. Really interesting. So that concludes our presentation portion of today's seminar. I'm excited now to introduce our panelists who will be joining our speakers to address all your questions. So our panelist has a background as a clinical medical physicist and researcher specializing in scintillaton and Cherenkov dosimetry. Following a successful clinical residency in radiation oncology physics at McGill University, she has now transitioned to her current role as the development advisor for scientific and technological entrepreneurship at Université Laval. In this role, she has undertaken the mission to catalyze the expansion of technological and scientific entrepreneurship within the university's Faculty of Science and Engineering. Our dedication to fostering innovation and entrepreneurship makes her a valuable addition to our panel today. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Émilie Cloutier as she joins our panel discussion. I'll now hand over to her to provide further insights into her background and expertise. Doctor, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chloe. That was a very nice introduction. So if I do this, do you all see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to be real quick because Chloe did a great introduction. So as she said, I did start a PhD in 2018. I was working on scintillation dosimetry, so I enjoyed that part of James Robar talk. During that PhD, we did craft 2 patents. So I had kind of a small insight in the industry, but still I decided I don't have the high risk tolerance that the previous 2 talks talked about, but I do get bored easily. So I started the clinical residency. And while doing the residency, I had the chance to work as well as a medical physicist. So I enjoyed, for example, commissioning a new DIPH technique. But while doing the residency, I was still not feeling completely satisfied and wanted to do something else, bring a little more innovation into my workplace. So the opportunity came right after my residency. The Université Laval was crafting a new role. They wanted to bring someone into the science and technology faculty to foster and catalyze entrepreneurship. And they wanted someone with a background in science and tech. So this is why I jumped in. Because it was a new role, I had a blank canvas, and that really sold it for me to bring new resources and create new initiatives. So I have a very long title, but I want to take advantage of this to bring some definitions. So the first one is scientific entrepreneurship. And I think this is interesting for you guys, since doing master and PhD, you're all doing public research right now. So scientific entrepreneurship describes any business that was created with the purpose of bringing to the market an innovation that stems from public research. So that we are talking about you right now. We are also technology entrepreneurship that kind of encompasses all of the other business with tech innovation. And the other words that we often talk about is the startup. So when we talk about the startup, we talk about business with a strong growth potential that are innovative and that are in the early stages of development. And I really want to emphasize on the startup word, because when you're a startup, you have access to so many resources, such as incubators, but as well as financial, legal, some counseling support. So these are all tools that are available when you start a technology company, and that are available. And I just want to finish with who are the scientific entrepreneurs, because 33% of them are youth. They are students, and 85% stems from academia. So you really are at the right place if the previous 2 talks sparked some interest in you. Usually as scientists, we don't see ourselves as entrepreneurs, but it really is a path that is open to you if you have an interest. So that completes it for me.
Thank you, Dr. Emily. That was great. So let's now dive into the Q&A. And the floor will be open for questions. Please feel free to type your question in the chat, or you can also raise your hand if you prefer to ask them verbally. So just check if there's question. Yes, Radim, you can go.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for your great presentations. Really enjoyed them. I was going to ask about timing. When do you think is the right time to look at, ideas that you have had percolating? Like I know I look at my notebooks and I see tons of ideas within there that I think, need to be implemented or pushed forward. Do you think it's something you do when you have your best idea? How do you identify that? Or do you wait until you at least have, say, your clinical residency done so that you have that fallback to a profession and your CCPM or AAPM credentials? So ABR or CCPM. This can be to anyone, right? Emily might have a different perspective because you're looking at students versus Karl and James.
Karl, you might be a good one because you've launched a few things at different times in your career, right?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think a large part of it is personal choice. And I think, most of the kind of changes I've made throughout my career have just been because I was starting to become unhappy with what I'm currently doing. So like in terms of timing, it was more just like, it's almost like I didn't have a choice about it. It would be more like, I'm getting bored of working in the small clinic, so I want to do something else now. It wasn't really like a plan per se of when to switch into, trying something different or, trying to commercialize a technology. I mean, I think timing, it's probably also based, like if you have an idea, so let's say, you've got a notebook with a bunch of different ideas. It probably would be useful to just make a little mini business plan around each one of those ideas. And you'll, like, as you drill down into each one of them, you'll either, find some reason why, probably most of them, you'll just find a reason why this is just not going to work, right? There's a fundamental issue with commercialization. But one of them, you might say, okay, wait a minute, this could actually work. And then, as you drill farther and farther down into that one idea, you could get all the way to the point where you're like, all right, maybe I should commercialize this. And this then, based on, James had a lot of really good points in his presentation. And one of them was, should I just license this to somebody else, or do I want to start a company around it? And even the ideas that could just be a startup company, or not just, but could be a startup company, you can still license to somebody else that wants to do all the work of the startup company, right? You get a much smaller percentage of the potential reward, but if you in your personal life, you're not ready to make that decision, you still have that option.
Yeah, for me, with the Adaptiiv example, I just felt that someone was going to do that really, really soon if we didn't do it. So because it just, like one of my lessons said, I felt like it was a really obvious thing to do that we really needed in the clinic, because I knew what the alternatives were, and they were terrible. So I didn't feel like I had much choice then. I thought I'd missed the boat if we didn't go for it. I guess the IP would have protected us to some extent, but maybe not for long. In terms of like stage of career, I feel like I could have done this at any stage of career, like grad student, resident, working thereafter. I think that's fine. But then again, as I said, I didn't dive with both feet into this. I have a full-time position in Nova Scotia Health. So, I've had to limit the amount of time that I spend on this. And then you made a point or raised a question about, do you wait until you have your best idea? I don't think that's a good idea, because you don't know if it's your best idea. Like I said, sometimes you think it's your best idea and you find out that the market doesn't think it's your best idea. So what Karl described, which is a mini business case, there are ways to vet things, to do surveys of the market, to figure out the total addressable market. There are well-known methods to figure out whether it's likely to fly, whether it's even viable. So I would recommend doing that, subjecting your best idea to that.
I would encourage you to really take advantage of your student status, because you, as a student, you have access to many resources to explore entrepreneurship and also to ask questions, talk about your project, and hear your voice of customer. Is there really a problem that you want to tackle? Is there a pain in the industry that you can fix? So these are the questions that you can ask. And also finishing your master or your PhD will earn you credibility, and that will help you along the way. So yeah, that would be my advice.
Thank you all for your answers. It's really, really good to hear your insights.
Thank you for the speakers answering the question. Do we have another question from the audience? Okay, there's one from the chat. For Dr. Otto or anyone else, you briefly touched upon the fact that not all projects have been successful. How did you assess whether to continue with an idea or when to conclude that a project isn't viable?
Yeah, that's a really good question, actually. I mean, yeah, I don't know if this will be a satisfying answer, but for me, I just kept working on things until it wasn't fun anymore. So once you feel like and you're not going to be too motivated to continue working on something that isn't really working. So it's almost like you'll feel it. You'll be like, okay, I'm not enjoying this anymore. It's not going anywhere. Then it's probably time to kill it and move on to something else. So yeah, I mean, I would go with your gut. I don't know if there's another way to really assess it. I mean, even the thing is, even if people tell you, no, this is a bad idea, if you think it's still a good idea, you should keep working on it, in my opinion. Because there's a lot of cases where, like, in fact, for VMAT, a lot of people, in fact, it's interesting, the clinicians that weren't doing any research, they were excited about it immediately, but a lot of the research community didn't like it. They actually didn't think it would work, and it didn't make any sense. And because I think I mentioned in my presentation, it was this kind of fundamental feeling that you had to trade off quality for efficiency. So there was this, a feeling that it shouldn't be possible. If I listened to those researchers, and some of them were very well known in the field, they even wrote like an editorial about why it would never work. If I had listened to that and just hung up my hat and said, I'm done, then, somebody else would have done it probably, and I wouldn't have had the success I had with it. So it's really the take home message, I think, is just go with your gut. If you think it's not going to work, if you don't enjoy working on it anymore, then just stop.
A couple aspects to that. One is how you feel when you're working on it. Do you think it's valuable? Is it interesting? And just to take that one more step, I mean, you can produce something that works, that obviously works, but a separate problem might be having it adopted within clinics, right? Clinicians are sticks in the mud. They move slowly. Many of them are used to doing things one way. I talked about wax and thermoplastic and stuff like that, conventional brachytherapy applicators. You can work on technology like that and develop it, and you can know it works because maybe you've piloted this in a few test centers, something like that. But like from the commercial point of view, there's also the adoption curve, right? There's a toe on that curve, then there's a steep portion, and then it's a sigmoidal curve, typically. And so you also have to have the conviction to get through the toe of that curve, right? You need to stick it out and believe that it's going to be adopted. And that's where the business activity really heats up, marketing, that kind of thing.
Yeah, so I think the only thing I can add is there's a distinction between the problem that you want to tackle and the solution that you want to bring. If you have echoes that the problem doesn't really exist, listen to these echoes, because if there isn't a problem, there are no business opportunities. But if it's the solution that for which there are challenges, then but there is a real problem, then this is when you can continue and really bring the innovation.
Great, thank you. Is there another question in the chat? If not, I'll just ask one myself. All right. So, how important has mentorship and networking been in your entrepreneurship journey? Can you share a bit how you built your network and how you found mentors in the field that helped you build a company?
I guess I can start with that one. So I was really lucky at BC Cancer when I was working on VMAT. The head of BC Cancer for radiation therapy, Dr. Tom Keane, was extremely supportive of me, and he would love to just come down and to my office when I was doing my clinical work to chat with me for like an hour or two, like every couple of days. And he was, I don't know, he without his support and his confidence in my abilities, I mean, he's one of the reasons I was able to get a meeting with the CEO and the president of Varian. You know, that was really lucky for me. So yeah, having mentors or people that believe in you that are more senior when you're junior can be extremely helpful. How do you find those people? It's a good question. I mean, I think just going and talking to people and asking them about their research and explaining, being open with, you know, people that that you respect about what your goals are. That's a good way to start that conversation. And I think, you know, most people, now that I'm a more senior person, most senior people are pretty flattered when you go to them and say, look, I'd like you to be my mentor. I've been impressed by your career. Can you help me out? Like, if somebody came to me and said that, then I would be, you know, I would want to help that person.
Yeah, I also had really good people within my institution. I'll talk about a couple things. First of all, I told the story of Bruce Ross, right? Bruce was our patient. We treated him for base of tongue cancer. And what I didn't add to the end of the story was, even though Bruce did not become an operator within the company, he became a board member of the company. So how cool is it that a patient joined our board? And Bruce had decades of experience, right, in the medtech sector. So one of the happy endings to that story is Bruce, you know, was my patient but became my mentor, which I think is super cool. Then I had a lot, like Karl, I had a lot of interest and great support within my institution. So the technology transfer offices at DAL as well as Nova Scotia Health are incredibly supportive, like to the point that the person within the tech transfer office, her name was Doris Grant. If I had IP to license to a company, let's say, I would go to the Astro meeting to meet with, you know, potential licensees, and Doris would be on the plane with me. You know, maybe because she thought it wasn't a great idea for a physicist to negotiate licensing of a patent, but like she was right there. And I'll tell you a funny story about that. We had a patent to license around 4-pi radiotherapy, so trajectory-based radiotherapy, and there were a few companies that were interested in this patent, and there were Doris and I on our way to Astro. It was in San Antonio that year, and we had a layover in New Jersey, in Newark, because we were both coming from Halifax. And so Doris and I got a bite to eat in the airport, something like that. And we went to the gate, and they called me up to the gate, and I was upgraded to business class. I thought, oh, that's really nice. And they said, okay, you can also board right now. I said, okay, why not? So I went to my seat, 2C or whatever. And I looked at the guy who was already on the plane in the seat beside me, and it was the CEO of a big company. And I still haven't solved that mystery, how he was able to upgrade me and get me sitting beside him. But the funny thing was, Doris was on the plane in like row 35 or something, and had been trying to get through to this guy to license the patent for a long time, but she couldn't get through like the wall of administrative assistants. So like when he got up to use the washroom in the plane, I like ran back to row 35. I was like, Doris, I'm sitting beside this guy. She's like, don't even joke about it. So anyway, that's a little story to tell you how fun and like adventurous entrepreneurship can also be. You have to be lucky as well, as Karl pointed out. I feel like sometimes I've had good luck like that story. Sometimes I've had bad luck, like kind of a mixture. But yeah, you find yourself in situations that you definitely wouldn't be in if you were just in the clinic, right?
In your journey, you will probably have many different mentors, and probably the first one you will have might be the PI that you have currently. So do not underestimate the impact of that person, the impact that they can have, and also do not underestimate their network, because if you reach out to them and ask them for help, they probably will be able to connect you with someone that they know that you don't. Also, do not underestimate your current network. You're probably making friends at your institutions, and all these friends will spread out into many different institutions. And in a couple of years from now, you will have a network that is spread across many institutions because of the friends that you are, the friendship that you are building currently. So take advantage of that.
Great, Mike. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for the answers. We got one question from the chat. It says, thanks a lot for awesome, inspiring presentations. Can I ask, is it necessary to take MBA, and when, after having the idea or when you got deeper experience in your specialization?
I can start with that one. So James was very nice in his presentation saying that I'm some kind of unicorn because I can also be CEO and a medical physicist. Well, I'm CEO because I was the default CEO of the company. I was just the best person for the job at the time. And it's been, out of my comfort zone here as CEO. I've learned a lot so far, but I think that if I had more MBA type training, it would have been easier. I mean, there's just a lot of things I need to figure out and look up and learn as I'm going along that I wouldn't have had to do if I had already had an MBA. So I don't think it's essential to have an MBA. And I actually know a lot of people that did a startup and then kind of did an MBA part-time for several years so that they were just being exposed to business administration as they were doing their CEO job. I think that's another option. So I think it's useful, but it's not essential.
Yeah, I agree. But then again, I'm not the CEO, so.
I once heard someone saying that we usually think of the clinical residency as the default path of medical physics. But do remember that it's a 2 years that you are free to invest wherever you want. The clinical residency is the default, but you might be interested otherwise in an MBA, or maybe doing a common law, or so you really are free to think about what you want to make the most, how you want to make the most of these 2 years.
I think there are some really cool newer degree programs as well, aside from MBA, right? There are like degrees in entrepreneurship that you can do now, which I think would be a lot of fun and super useful.
Oh, I see we have a question. Yes, you can go. The one who raised your hand.
Hello, so thank you for this presentation. My question is more about what is first. It's like to have the idea or to look for persons with whom you're gonna work, or to develop the idea and then go for these persons. So it's like, what is the priority?
I think it depends on your personality. If you want to work in a group to develop something from nothing, then you can take that path. I mean, you have to find the right people and make sure that you're compatible with those people. That can be tricky to do, before you actually start working with them. Personally, this is a fault of mine, I'd say. I like to do stuff on my own and figure things out by myself. I mean, I'm eager to get criticism and to seek out advice, but I kind of like to figure things out on my own. So for most of my technological, so the technology that I developed myself and then commercialized, it was really solo. And I enjoyed doing that. My current job as CEO, the base technology was actually figured out by the other founders. So even though I understand it and I've kind of added to it, that's also been, I mean, I was almost seeking out that experience because I had in the past done things solo. Being able to work as a group is something new to me. And, as I mentioned about 5 times already, I get bored easily. So I wanted to try something different. So I think, both paths are good, and it just depends on what you want to do.
I would say you have the idea. If you're in a good supportive institution, file a provisional patent on that idea early. Second phase of that is usually a PCT, which reserves your right to a patent internationally for a period of time. And it's not that expensive to go through those steps. And so work with your tech transfer office if you are in an institution that has one to do that stuff. Your idea might be amazing and valuable or not, but you haven't lost much in doing that. And as a student or a resident, at the very least, you'll learn how to do that, right? You'll learn how to write a patent and work with patent counsel. It's actually really interesting. So I would say do that after you have the idea. When to pursue your idea, it probably depends on the idea, I guess. I guess a common thing in a way to what Karl's done and what I've done is we kind of got to the point in knowing that it was going to work, right? That or there were no barriers against it working. So at that point, I think it's a good time to look at commercialization.
Yeah, and you're also, especially if you're a junior, if you're like a student, you want to make sure that the technology you're going to try to peddle to one of these larger companies does work to some, it doesn't have to work completely perfectly all the time, but it has to achieve at least a certain level that you're not going to bring it to a company and they're going to license it, and if it doesn't work, you're going to be building a pretty negative reputation for yourself at an early stage in your career. So you should be careful of that as well.
Also, if you want to commercialize something that stems from your research, you probably want to address this with your supervisor and make sure you have the liberty of exploiting that technology, and also sit with the transfer office of your university to make sure that everything is done in the correct rules.
It's actually
Perfect,
really relevant to, I'm on CAMPEP, I'm a reviewer for CAMPEP, and so I look at a lot of graduate curricula, and I really think that in most curricula, topics like this, entrepreneurship, IP, licensing, the rights of a graduate student in that process, the methodology, it's missing from most graduate programs. So we inject a little bit of that into our grad program at Dal. We bring in like people from the tech transfer office to talk about these things. I'd like to convince the board of CAMPEP that these should be required topics in the curriculum to some depth, you know.
Yeah, if you can educate yourself sooner is better, because the day that you have an innovation to protect, it's kind of too late to learn how to craft a patent, because you need to craft it really soon and talk with lawyers. So really educate yourself if you're interested.
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you. This is a great discussion here. Do we have more questions from the audience? Okay, I have a question for Emily. How did you perceive the role of universities in fostering entrepreneurship among students, particularly within the realm of medical physics?
Okay, so in my perspective, we all know it, the innovation stems from academia, but as Karl and James said this, academia itself will not bring the technology to the market. If you want the innovation to reach the patient, you need entrepreneurship. So I think the role of university is, one, to provide resources to help the student take that leap of faith, but also to kind of spark the light to do some to do some promotion of the entrepreneurship, and to kind of make it more accessible, because we all have that idea of the CEO that wears a suit, that's very important and that knows how to do everything, but as a student that's kind of intimidating. So we really want to, I think our role is to make sure that there are resources, the resources are known and they are accessible.
I guess I have a question for Emily. I mean, I kind of have my own answer to this as well, but so how important do you think it is that the student or the inventor stay involved in the process if they're licensing it to another company through the university?
Oh, yeah, that's a big one. I think often that's the case. The industry will want some of the inventor to be implicated to make sure that the transfer is smooth. But that can be tricky for that can be some golden handcuff for the students or the entrepreneurs. So yeah, is it where you wanted this to go?
Yeah, no, I think it's even if you have a really good invention, I think it's critical that the inventor stay involved in the process. Like, I think it's important that the inventor, whether it's the student or professor or whatever, if they should not have the attitude that, oh, okay, I'll file a patent and then I can just give it to the technology transfer office and then I don't have to worry about it and I'll start collecting royalties. It's totally not the case. I think it's pretty critical actually that the inventor stay involved, because whoever is going to license it wants to, people, humans are emotional, and they would want the inventor to be involved and passionate about the invention. And, they're going to have to convince the company that this invention is special and that they should license it. And, yeah.
Yes, and realistically, when you craft a patent, you don't have a product necessarily. You have something in the lab, but that is very far from the market. Sometimes, many times, it will involve some duct tape and some things that will not make it a product that a customer will buy. So, of course, there will be some research and development before it reaches the market, and the inventors will need to be involved.
And I'll just add that, it's very telling. The term sheet from the company that's licensing the patent is very telling in terms of whether they want to actually bring this to market. And I've licensed a few technologies aside from 3D printing related stuff. I've seen some term sheets where it's very simple. You're basically licensing your invention, off it goes to the company. There could be no involvement of the inventor potentially. And at the other end of the spectrum, the term sheet says, we, the company, want 200 hours of the inventor's time. We will compensate them in terms of consulting and everything, but that's an indicator that they actually want to bring it to market. Just because something's licensed to a company doesn't mean the company wants to bring it to market. They may actually want to keep it out of the hands of their competitors, and it could sit on the shelf. So if you ever find yourself licensing something, working with your tech transfer office, then have a look at that. Pay attention to that aspect.
And if you want to be the one that will be licensing, if you want to convince your transfer office that they should bet on you to take the technology, then you have to convince them that you will put efforts and time into this, and that you are the one that will achieve the go-to-market.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for our speakers. We still have a couple minutes left, and we got a question in the chat. What kind of soft skills did you think are important as you make self-pitch, secure funding, and establish partnerships? Did you need to establish them outside of your experience in academia?
I'll kick it off. Probably not with a complete list. Ability to communicate. Well, I'd put near the top. Right? You have an idea, you have to convey that in a way that is completely understandable to a whole bunch of people who are not in medical physics, potentially not in, maybe not even in radiation oncology. If you're raising funds, you need to be able to communicate the potential impact of that idea. So that's, I put that near the top, maybe. Karl mentioned this a few times, but like, are you passionate about it? Are you excited about it? Guess what? People can tell. If you're not excited about it, it's going to be pretty obvious and not a compelling pitch, I imagine. So anyway, those are two to start the conversation.
Yeah, James, I've known James for 30 years, and he is a master of communication. I've always been jealous of his ability to communicate with people and his just general kind of demeanor and the way he like connects with people when he's talking, giving presentations also one-on-one. So I think, yeah, I'm sure that's helped James a lot in his career, and I've tried to improve those skills over time as well. And I think the best way to improve those skills is just to practice it. So take opportunities to talk to a diverse spectrum of people. Don't just talk to medical physicists. Try to, if you could get an opportunity to give a presentation to a group of people that don't know anything about radiation therapy, you should take that opportunity and think about, okay, how can I explain this stuff so it's in simple terms? Like even the most complex concepts or ideas can be, distilled to different levels. So you can adjust it for an audience. So people in your own field and everything, you can explain things at the most complex, detailed level. But that same concept, you can, use metaphors and things like that to like explain the basic ideas of things to anyone, to, like, I don't know, public school kids, whatever. Then they'll get a decent feeling for what you're trying to do, right? And having those skills to be able to change that, to adjust that, scale, is really valuable.
I'm just gonna add a little something. I'm gonna flip the question and make you realize that the entrepreneur method is very similar to the scientific method. So you have to know the market, kind of do a review of what already exists. You have to aim at the problem and then build a method to address that problem. So these are all similar to the scientific method. So you already have some skills, but of course you need to complete them with communications and more managing skills.
I love to ask people questions when I'm talking to somebody that I'm not sure, what level of background they have, because you want to kind of calibrate what you should be saying to people, and you can't do that unless you get information about them. So if you can pepper them with a few kind of questions, and those questions will lead to specific other questions that will help you really get close to where they are. Then you can just kind of set how you should be talking to someone and communicate a lot more effectively.
Great, so we're nearing 2:30, so I think we'll have to close the session, but thank you so much for this amazing discussion. It was really interesting. So I'll just share my screen quickly because I have a few infos to give you before letting you go. Okay, you can see my screen, right? Good. So I want to thank all of you for joining us virtually, especially to our speakers and panelists for sharing their really great insights and expertise today. It was truly really interesting. If you wish to subscribe to COM Student Consult email list to know more about the next student events, you can scan the QR code presently on screen. Also, just a reminder that previous C3 seminars are available on the COM Student Consult YouTube channel, so you can rewatch them. Before letting you all go, I just want to advertise quickly our next C3 seminar, which will be on March 27th. This will explore frontiers in medical physics with 3 great speakers covering subjects like the use of gold nanoparticles in radiotherapy, mRNAs, and upright radiotherapy treatment. So you can register now using the QR code shown on screen. With this, I want to thank everyone again, and I wish you all great success in your next entrepreneurship endeavors. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.